The chair scraped back, and Adaeze Obi sat down at the head of the family table, like she owned the room. Because in every way that mattered she did. She smoothed the front of her ivory silk dress, the one that had taken a woman in Port Harcourt 9 months, to bead by hand, 9 months of mornings bent over a frame, threading each pearl-white bead by lamplight, because Adaeze's mother had called the woman and said, "My daughter is getting married, and I want the dress to look like a prayer answered." The woman had said nothing. She had just picked up her needle and started. And here it was. Here Adaeze was. The reception hall was enormous, a traditional Korean estate built into the hillside outside Busan, all curved tile roofs and stone courtyards and walls that had been standing for 300 years. 500 guests filled the round tables that fanned out from the front, the kind of crowd that hums with its own energy, with laughter and the clinking of glasses and the low thunder of 500 people all talking at once. Waiters moved between tables like water finding channels. A live ensemble played something soft near the east wall. Outside, through the latticed doors, a koi pond caught the afternoon light and threw it back in pieces. Adaeze set her beaded clutch on the table in front of her. Inside it, beneath her phone and her lip balm, and a folded handkerchief her grandmother had pressed into her hand that morning, was a small white envelope. She had written nothing on the outside of it. She did not need to. She knew what was inside. She had been carrying it for 3 days, ever since she had sat alone in the bathroom of her Seoul apartment at 6 in the morning and held a small printed photograph up to the light and pressed her hand over her mouth and cried so quietly that Jae-won, asleep in the next room, had not heard a single sound. She had decided that morning that she would not tell him before the wedding. She had decided that she would let the day be the day. She would let him stand at the front of the hall and watch her walk toward him and cry the way she knew he would cry, because Jae-won Shin cried at things that were beautiful and did not apologize for it, and she loved him for it completely. She would let them say the words and put on the rings and become each other's in front of everyone they had invited into that moment. And then, at the reception, after the vows and the rings and the toasts, she would reach into her clutch and take out the small white envelope, and she would hand it to him, and she would say the speech she had been quietly composing in her head for 3 days. It was a good speech. She knew it was good. She had practiced it twice in the mirror at 4 in the morning when she could not sleep, standing in the dark in her robe with the city lights of Seoul behind her, and both times she had made herself cry, which she considered a reliable indicator of quality. She was thinking about the speech when the woman sat down across from her. She did not sit so much as arrive. She was wearing a cream jacket and a strand of pearls the size of small plums, and she carried herself the way certain women carry themselves when they have decided in advance that every room they enter belongs to them. She looked at Adaeze the way a customs officer looks at a passport she does not recognize, not with anger exactly, but with a slow and deliberate skepticism, a performance of doubt. "You are at the wrong table," the woman said. Her voice was not loud yet. It was the voice she used before she decided to be loud. Adaeze had never met Shin Bokja in person. She had seen photographs. She had heard stories from Jae-won, told in that careful, measured way. He told stories about his mother, the way a man describes a storm he has survived and is not entirely sure will not return. Adaeze looked at her. "I don't think so," she said. "The staff table is at the back," Bokja said. And now the volume shifted, just slightly, just enough for the couple at the nearest table to pause their conversation, just enough for a waiter passing behind Bokja to slow his step. "I will have someone bring you a plate. You must be hungry after the journey." Adaeze did not move. She folded her hands on the table in front of her. The henna on the back of her right hand was 4 days old and still dark, a pattern of interlocking vines and flowers that her grandmother in Nasuka had guided an artist to draw over a video call sitting in her kitchen 6,000 miles away, squinting at a small screen saying, "A little to the left? No, the other left," while the tears ran down her face and she pretended they were not. "I am the bride," Adaeze said. The words landed simply. No decoration, no argument built around them. Just the fact, stated the way you state a fact when you are not interested in debating it. Bokja smiled. It was a tight smile, a prepared one, the smile of a woman who had anticipated this exact response and had something ready for it. "My son," she said, loud enough now that the 3 nearest tables turned their heads in unison like a wave, "is marrying a young woman named Mirai Yoon. She is the daughter of a very respected family. I am sure you have been confused about the arrangements. It happens at large events." She lifted one finger and pointed, slow and deliberate, towards the back of the hall. "The staff eat well here, I made sure of it." The hall did not go quiet all at once. It went quiet in patches, table by table, the way silence travels when something has happened that people cannot quite believe but cannot quite ignore either. A grandmother at a table near the window set down her barley tea. A man in a gray suit stopped mid-sentence and turned his head. Near the back of the hall, a small child laughed at something unrelated and then stopped, because even a child can feel the temperature of a room change. 497 of the 500 guests were now watching. 3 cameras were rolling. A drone hummed in the courtyard outside, turning slow circles above the koi pond, recording everything. Shin Bokja had chosen her moment with the precision of someone who had been planning it for 8 weeks. She had waited until the bride was seated, and the cameras were live and the hall was full. She had waited until her son was still in the back room with his groomsmen, adjusting his tie for the 14th time, because he was nervous and because his cousin kept telling him it was crooked even when it was not. She had waited for the exact moment when Adaeze was alone and visible and surrounded, and then she had stood up and she had said, in front of everyone, that her son was marrying somebody else. She was going to save him, she was certain of it. She had told herself this every morning for 8 weeks. She had told herself that Adaeze Obi was a woman who had used cleverness and beauty and whatever else women like that used to pull a good Korean man away from his own people, and that the kindest thing a mother could do was expose the trick before it became permanent, before there were children, before there was no clean way out. She had told herself that her son would be embarrassed for a moment, yes, and then relieved. She had told herself that he would thank her, maybe not today. But eventually, Adaeze looked at the empty chair across from her, Jae-won's chair. He had kissed her on the cheek 40 minutes ago, just before the ceremony, and whispered in her ear, "I'll see you on the other side of the best day of my life," and then walked away backward for 3 steps, which she had laughed at. She thought about that now. She thought about the way he had cried quietly into her shoulder the night she said yes, and apologized for crying, and then cried again anyway, because Jae-won Shin, for all his composure and all his quiet steel, was a man who felt things completely and could not always help it. She thought about the envelope. She looked up at Bokja, who was still standing, still performing, letting the silence do its work, and Adaeze said, in a voice so calm it was almost gentle, "I will wait for my husband." If you have been watching Story Nova TV for a while, you already know that when the quiet ones speak, the room changes. This woman has not raised her voice once. She has not moved from her chair, and she is about to walk out of this hall having won everything without throwing a single punch. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now, because this channel is where the stories that stay with you live. We are just getting started. Bokja let the smile sit on her face a moment longer. Then she turned to address the hall more directly, because an audience was an audience, and she had not dressed in cream and pearls to speak to one person. "My son," she said, "is a generous man, a kind man. He has been very kind to this young woman, but there are appropriate limits, and a wedding is not the place." She stopped, because Jae-won Shin had just walked into the hall. He had been on his way from the back room. He had been laughing at something his cousin said, his hand still on the lapel of his jacket where the cousin had been fussing with it. He had stepped through the wide entrance to the courtyard, and he had heard his mother's voice, carrying the way it always carried when she wanted to be heard, and the laugh had left his face the way a flame leaves a candle when someone puts a hand over it. He stood very still for a moment, just listening. Then he walked. He did not walk fast. He walked the way a man walks, when he is completely certain of where he is going and does not require anyone's permission to get there. He passed table 8, past table 5, past the camera crew, past his uncle Daeho, who half rose from his chair and then sat back down when he saw his nephew's face, because Daeho had known Jae-won since he was 4 years old, and he knew that face, and he knew that whatever was happening did not require his involvement. Jae-won's face was not angry. That was the thing about him. He did not perform his anger. He contained it, compressed it, turned it into something colder and quieter and far more precise. His face went still. The warmth drained from it. His eyes, which were usually the warmest thing about him, went flat and clear like water just before it freezes. He reached the head table. He did not look at his mother. He looked at Adaeze. He looked at her the way a man looks at someone who has been standing in the rain and pretending they are not wet, and he pulled out the chair beside her and sat down slowly, carefully, like a man sitting next to someone who is hurt and does not want to be seen flinching. He picked up her hand, the henna hand. He placed it on the table between them where the whole room could see it. Then he turned to his mother. "Mother," Jae-won said, "sit down. Coming up, the reckoning begins, and what Jae-won says next will silence the entire hall. Drop a comment below. Whose side are you on, and what would you have done in Adaeze's place? And if this story has you gripped already, like this video. It helps more people find Story Nova TV.